Hello, St. John's friends. Thanks for tuning in today. I know that some of you are familiar with the color purple, and I don't mean this, and honestly, this was totally coincidental. The Color Purple, the novel, which was then made into a movie, a story based on an entire collection of letters that were written by a young African-American girl by the name of Celie. Celie had at one point received the advice as relates to her stories in life that said, you better not tell nobody but God, because it'd kill your mama. And so, Celie wrote her letters of lament about her life of suffering and poverty. And because the content of these letters certainly would break any mother's heart, the letters all began, "Dear God." Throughout her years, her childlike faith is shaken over and again by repeated indignities of all sorts. Her father is lynched. Her mother goes mad. Sadly, Celie is abused in many different ways and ultimately raped. And as her life is being pulled apart into fragments, she writes yet another letter to God and concludes it by saying, "You must be asleep." I wonder if any of you listening to my voice right now have at one time or another in your lifetime felt like praying perhaps that same lament, asking in one form or another, "Dear God, are you sleeping or what?" I grant you that we tend most often not to approach our God with reason and with calm in crisis situations, but rather like a child who gets all of a sudden a bloodied and scraped up knee going running to mom to make the hurting stop. We look for an immediate response, or our prayers of lament are not answered in the way we would like them to be answered, and we wonder if God might be sleeping. We find that if God doesn't snap to attention or leap to our defense in a significant moment of need, we feel vulnerable as though in an open boat, at the mercy of the raging wind and waves in the middle of a storm. And that, of course, is a story that comes to us in Mark's Gospel, chapter 4. At church on Sunday, whether online or in person, you will hear that story read. That story about Jesus and his disciples in the middle of a raging storm. It's a story that Pastor Walter will be speaking about. It's a story that reminds us of just how much of a human being Jesus was. Why? Because he was asleep, like all human beings require. He slept, a natural and needed thing. Jesus had been teaching that day beside the Sea of Galilee, and because the crowds were so great, he had to go out in a fishing boat in the water. But in that place, unsuspectingly, storms would arise quickly. And of course, what happened? The disciples were fearful. They didn't know what was happening around them. They still didn't know Jesus very well, and they were very concerned that he was asleep. They woke him up, and they learned that the wind and the waves, they learned that the raging storms of life, they learned that there was nothing too powerful to come to a dead halt in response to the word of Jesus himself. There's a word of hope in there for you and for me. When the storms of life are raging, we can pray, "Lord, stand by me." See you in church. Thanks for tuning in today.